the human being. On the quest to understand ourselves scientifically, we know so much from the form to the organs, cells, molecules, atoms, waves, and more. Yet every new discovery teaches us one immutable and persistent lesson. We know very little of ourselves, our reality, our potential. Especially the mysterious psychedelic compound DMT. DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is a molecule produced within the human brain that is also known to be the most potent psychedelic substance in the world. Groundbreaking research has recently taken place. But before we take that dive, let's explore where it all started. German pharmacologist Otto Louis was the first to discover neuronal communication based on chemical release. He also discovered the first neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. Since then, the classical neurotransmitters were established, such as serotonin, which regulates mood and perception, and dopamine, which plays a role in how we feel pleasure and is a big part of how we think and plan. In 1931, a Canadian chemist named Richard Mansky synthesized an unsuspecting chemical that had been used for visionary and spiritual purposes for thousands of years. In June of 1965, German researchers Franzen and Gross discovered and quantified DMT in human blood and urine. In 1972, Saavedra and Axelrod demonstrated biosynthesis of DMT in mammalian tissues. Throughout the 1960s, scientists attempted to find a link between endogenous DMT and psychotic disorders. However, the results of these studies proved inconclusive. And then, due to the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, all research in all countries on all psychedelic compounds stopped. Decades went by, and these compounds, including the ones produced within, went unstudied. Only thanks to brave psychonauts like Dennis and Terence McKenna was the story of DMT kept alive.
Psychedelics, these were marginalized, these were ignored. DMT and 5-methoxy-DMT, they're not just about the visual experience. There's a huge emotional experience to it, and they induce ecstasy.
At the turn of the 1990s, Dr. Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico broke through that strict prohibition with the first human DMT studies as he injected nearly 400 doses into roughly 6 volunteers.
The design of the study was fairly straightforward: give people DMT and measure as many variables as possible. In the case of this study, which was going to be the first new psychedelic research in the U.S. really for over 20 years, I had to sort of anticipate a lot of objections that would come my way from the regulatory agencies that oversee this kind of research.
In the year 2000, Dr. Strassman published his findings in the book DMT, the Spirit Molecule. This book brought the topic of DMT to a mainstream audience outside of strict scientific circles. Dr. Strassman named DMT the Spirit Molecule based on the consistent reports of realer-than-real spiritual experiences from high-dose administration.
I started off seeing shapes, and then there were cats, and then I felt like I fell out of space and ended up at the Last Supper in heaven or something. I don't consider myself spiritual, and I'm going, why would my brain take me there? I was going through some emotional turmoil, and I didn't feel safe or welcome or like I had friends, and it just felt at the end like it was okay and I was loved.
A decade later, in 2010, the book became a documentary hosted by comedian and podcaster Joe Rogan, catapulting the discussion of DMT and ayahuasca onto an even bigger global stage, reaching tens of millions of viewers.
What is ayahuasca?
It's just like it's like a tree root. It's got DMT in it.
So for someone like me, the ayahuasca experience is essential. I need to be beaten down occasionally.
I had a really eye-opening experience of ayahuasca. It was really intense.
In his book, Dr. Strassman hypothesized that the pineal gland, a gland long associated with mysticism in Eastern traditions, is the source of DMT in the brain. But in 2013, Dr. Jimo Borjigan led a study at the University of Michigan, which finally proved that the pineal gland produces DMT and put all the speculation to rest. This study further increased the interest of DMT in pop culture.
You don't even need to seek DMT externally to you. No, your pineal gland produces it.
My guests are terrified! Yes! And their brains are releasing adrenaline, dopamine, even dimethyltryptamine from the pineal gland!
But there was still speculation that we might only produce this mysterious compound at select moments of life, some of which only occur in a fraction of the population.
They've proven that their pineal gland is producing dimethyltryptamine, which is what it's always been anecdotal evidence. So now they know that it's not just produced by the liver and the lungs, but it's also produced by this little gland. And this little gland, they think, during near-death experiences and during heavy REM sleep, it's producing DMT.
DMT is ubiquitous in the natural world. It's found in hundreds, if not thousands, of plants. Ones that are used for their psychoactivity and ones that aren't. Been found in every mammal that's been studied. I don't think DMT would have gotten anywhere near as popular during the first wave of clinical research if it weren't for the fact that it was endogenous.
As the public continued to show their interest in DMT with increasing internet searches, DMT began to hit the mainstream music scene.
And dimethyltryptamine and lysergic acid dynamite. The vibes are effervescent, delicious, just how they should be.
I done died and lived again on DMT, huh? See, this the type of high that won't come down. This the type of high that...
Comedians began spreading the word about the experience.
DMT is like, hey, you know all of this reality and perception that you are super familiar with and very convinced is real? Well, sorry about this. Zip.
Everyone all of a sudden wanted to know, what in the world is DMT? And why do we produce this otherworldly compound in our brains?
Give people DMT and they all came back with the same story. I was blasted out of my consciousness.
What exactly does an LSD or DMT breakthrough feel like?
Even the lesser understood compound 5-MeO DMT began hitting popular internet shows, touting its mystical experience of oneness with creation.
My experience with 5-MeO is a connection to all that is. I felt the direct connection to spirit, to soul, to my own soul.
Lesser known still is the fact that this compound too is found within humans. Just as the popularity of the DMT discussion seemed to be reaching its peak, it happened. Former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson decided to take the 5-MeO DMT plunge.
My whole life totally changed. It sounds like a movie script, but it's really the real deal.
Following his 5-MeO DMT experience, Tyson would discuss his transformation from an ego-driven ex-fighter into a spiritually transformed individual.
How did this happen to me? I'm not leading my ship. I'm not driving this fucking car, not me.
After Tyson made his 5-MeO DMT use public in 2019, the interest in DMT reached an all-time high. That same year, a groundbreaking discovery out of the University of Michigan regarding endogenous DMT was published. It should have garnered global media headlines across the world based on the fact that it radically altered everything we knew about endogenous DMT.
The paper that came out of Ann Arbor in 2019 is a landmark publication.
I think it's a game changer in terms of beginning to expand our understanding of the role of endogenous DMT. What's surprising to me is, why has this been overlooked for so long?
The lead author for the paper is a young scientist straight out of Youngstown, Ohio, Dr. John Dean.
When I started my undergrad, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to get into. I'd always enjoyed science and started to just take the prereq classes that I would need to get a bachelor's degree. Around that time, I had a very good friend of mine die, sort of unexpectedly, and that kind of sent me into a little existential era. I was prescribed just like a anti-anxiety medication. So that really was kind of profound to see the impact that taking this little pill could have on my psychology.
John reported that his prescription didn't help him process his emotions, leading to a hiatus from school so he could tour with his indie band, Asleep, who ended up performing on South by Southwest and recording with famed producer Steve Albini. He spent time teaching guitar to autistic children at Youngstown State until he rediscovered his love for science.
Then I took a chemistry course and was super into it. And it was around that time when I read Rick Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. That kind of got me interested in the idea of like mind over matter, matter over mind, and that sort of thing. Coming to realize that there's this compound that's floating around in humans that's relatively understudied, that is one of the most powerful psychedelics there is. The fact that something like that's floating around in our bodies, even if it's doing nothing, very intriguing. What does that mean for reality? What does that mean for how the brain works? We don't know, right?
DMT was always believed to be produced in such trace amounts that its presence was inconsequential to human consciousness. However, the 2019 publication spearheaded by John Dean and Jimo Borjigan turned this whole scientific belief on its head. There are 3 groundbreaking discoveries to this 2019 paper that John published. The first was in regards to just how much DMT is actually produced in the mammalian brain.
We actually put a probe directly into the brain of a living rat. We would directly sample the brain fluid, the dialysate, if you will, from these animals. And then we would run these on an analytical chemistry technique called high-performance liquid chromatography. And then we compared DMT and serotonin. And in that regard, what we found was, in my opinion, the heart of the study, that DMT was actually in nanomolar concentrations in the range of serotonin.
The significance of DMT being found at levels comparable to serotonin is found in just how vital serotonin is for everyday life. From sleeping, eating, and digestion to bone health and wound health, it's a natural mood stabilizer. Low levels of serotonin are associated with depression, anxiety, and insomnia, while people with normal levels report feeling happier, calmer, and more focused. DMT is also found in comparable levels to dopamine, which is released when the brain expects a reward, and in normal amounts helps with alertness, motivation, focus, happiness, and feelings of euphoria. So why is DMT swimming around in mammalian brains at levels comparable to serotonin and dopamine?
I'm really more concerned with what is DMT doing in the normal waking brain. Is it responsible for visual perception? We know that it has antidepressant properties. This has been shown in microdosing too. Those studies are intriguing because it sets up the idea that you don't necessarily need this psychedelic amount of this compound in your brain for some sort of natural effect.
This points to or indicates the possibility of the existence of a DMT neurotransmitter system. What would the role be? What is, the hallmark of the DMT experience? People, come out of it and they say that was more real than real. So there is a profound, sense of certainty and truth, which is associated with elevated brain levels of DMT. If you wanted to speculate wildly, one could argue, that the DMT neurotransmitter system mediates our sense of reality.
If it is correct that DMT mediates our sense of reality, then is reality itself a partial hallucination? Or could DMT be even more functional to our everyday waking consciousness than just psychedelic experiences?
Well, maybe we're in a simulation right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. And I mean, like the strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following. That 40 years ago, we had Pong, like 2 rectangles and a dot. That was what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality. We should hope that that's true, because otherwise, if civilization stops advancing, then that may be due to some calamitous event that erases civilization.
Simulation theory is nothing new. As it is presently more of a hypothesis, some scientists have linked their understanding of it directly with DMT as being the key to unlock the matrix. Measuring DMT or even serotonin and dopamine directly is difficult. Therefore, basic neurochemistry relies heavily on measuring the capacity for biosynthesis of these chemicals via the enzymes that produce them. Enzymes are built from folded proteins that allow the body to convert raw materials from the environment into chemicals that the body uses to function. In order for the team at the University of Michigan to understand DMT synthesis, they first began looking at the enzymes INMT and AADC that bring the amino acid tryptophan all the way to DMT. And this is what sparked the second groundbreaking discovery in the 2019 paper. Just where inside the brain are the DMT enzymes found?
The 2 enzymes which are responsible for DMT synthesis occur in the same nerve cell, which is the final or the next to the final step in, definitively saying DMT is synthesized in the mammalian brain.
We were the first group, to my knowledge, to really emphasize or look for the 2 enzymes being present in the same cells at the same time. So we reasoned, though, that you need both of those enzymes to take tryptophan to DMT. If the same cells are expressing those enzymes, that the likelihood of DMT synthesis is much stronger in those areas. What we found was that the brain was one of the hotter sites of co-localization of the 2 DMT genes.
Dr. Dean found expression levels of both enzymes in the pineal gland, choroid plexus, and throughout the cerebral cortex.
We found very high expression of the DMT biosynthetic genes in that area where the cerebrospinal fluid is made.
Cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, is a colorless liquid produced inside the ventricles of the choroid plexus in order to supply nervous system tissue with nutrients, protect the brain from trauma, and carry away metabolic waste. We talked to one of the world's leading cerebrospinal fluid researchers, Dr. Mauro Zapatera, a medical doctor who also received his PhD from Harvard University, focusing on the significance of CSF in brain development.
I was looking at this section of a human brain at 8 weeks in development, and inside that space was this cauliflower-like structure, and it was huge. It was ginormous compared to the size of the developing cortex. And I turned to my colleague and I said, "What is that structure?" And he said, "That's the choroid plexus." I said, "Wait, if that produces CSF and it's so large, the CSF must have an important role in development." There was a teacher who was teaching us craniosacral therapy. We hold various areas of the body, mostly the cranium and the sacrum, and we assess for subtle pulsations that are occurring in the tissues, in the energy field, but also in the cerebrospinal fluid. And then he made a comment that, the cerebrospinal fluid is 1 molecule away from seawater. And I entered this, I'm sort of a skeptic with many things, and so I entered this with skepticism. And so I started that evening, I remember going home and looking up what the cerebrospinal fluid was. And I realized that there was not much current research going on in this fluid. It's dispersed throughout the ventricles. It even bathes the outside of the brain, and it goes down the middle of our spinal canal in the central canal, and it bathes our entire spinal cord. Essentially, if something gets dropped into this fluid, it can be dispersed through the entire brain. And so I wanted to see, has DMT ever been shown to be in the cerebrospinal fluid? And it actually has.
Another hypothesis is that breathing exercises can induce an increase in DMT in the brain, causing the visionary experiences that many have claimed are very similar to psychedelics.
Could breath work affect the cerebrospinal fluid pulsations that affect the way that cerebrospinal fluid is generated? You know, it's a signal to the choroid plexus to produce more of a certain compound, possibly DMT.
While visionary experiences induced by breathing exercises have been reported for thousands of years, there's a man from Holland who has recently taken this concept to a whole new level. Wim Hof is a Dutchman who holds 26 Guinness World Records for superhuman feats that defied the science of its day. And his breath practice has transformed millions of lives across the world.
We now know through research that respirations are actually being shown to affect cerebrospinal fluid movement.
Letting go of the mind. Follow the flow. Pull the air. Letting go. Pull the air. Letting go. Pull the air. After about 100 or 200 of these deep breaths is when I say, okay, and now pull it in. Hold and bring the cerebrospinal fluid to the head. And then suddenly the brainstem, the hippocampus, amygdala, epiphysis, it gets all so much blood flow, so much neural activity that it releases, that it opens up. It's amazing what happens. Human beings are capable of anything. That sounds mystical. And that is mystical because we have to learn to shut up and get into the depth of the brain where neurology meets the purpose of life. What is DMT and what is the significance of DMT in our lives? Visible, tangible, and usable. Because DMT is very important, only nobody knows. In the end, we are the alchemists, and we are able to metabolize our hormones into DMT too.
It's not definitively proven that breathwork can produce an increase in endogenous DMT, but barely anyone believed humans could control their immune or autonomic nervous system until Wim proved it in a study published in the prestigious journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And Wim was making those claims decades before the science caught up.
I am interested, deeply interested into the DMT exploration through scientific validation, because it's there to create neural pathways into those areas thought of inaccessible, only done by exogenous intake of ayahuasca, DMT, and all those things. And from there, I began to experiment. I had no money. I had to do it with where I was. And I found a way, absolute doorway into the depth.
That's one of the big challenges of psychedelic research, I think, is to try to bridge this profoundly subjective experience and link that to an objective, measurable thing.
Nick Glinos is one of the newest additions to Jimo Borjigin's lab in Michigan. Raised with an independent and slightly rebellious side, his time in Panama studying botany gave way to an interest in psychedelics, and their beneficial altered states drew him to endogenous DMT.
Psilocybin and LSD and MDMA and all these other psychoactive compounds that people are studying are extremely interesting and extremely powerful, but none of them are produced naturally by the body. So DMT gives us this opportunity to look at a naturally produced compound that may be affecting consciousness in a way that we don't know yet, and to use that to make a bridge or a link to the subjective experiences that are being elicited by some of these breathwork practices. Even from personal experience, I know that certain types of breathing can have a profound impact on physiological processes that are happening in the body. And whether or not that plays a role in anything related to DMT or 5-MeO-DMT, I can't really say at this time. But I would suspect that some sort of modulation of the monoamide neurotransmitter system is happening. I haven't done any specific intense breathing exercises, but more just basic mindful breathing.
What kind of effects has it had on you?
Well, I'd say increased calmness, increased focus. Sometimes I can sort of initiate sort of a dissociative effect in my body when doing certain types of meditative practices.
We get high on our own supply.
The question that's on many people's minds is, does the intense breath work of the Wim Hof technique lead to an increase in endogenous DMT? And does that altered state allow Wim's visualization to affect his biology in profound ways?
In terms of linking DMT to extreme physiology, like breathwork, is that link possible? I think so. Extreme physiology is incredibly just as under-researched as endogenous DMT.
Similar to the studies of psychedelics showing significant improvements in anxiety, depression, and addiction, hundreds of thousands of people have reported similar benefits by using the Wim Hof method, begging the question of whether the Wim Hof method induces similar brain activity to that of psychedelics. One consistent observation from psychedelic EEG studies is they all seem to increase gamma activity in the brain. There are 4 common brainwave signatures: delta with dreamless sleep, theta with deep relaxation, alpha with a non-thinking calm, and beta with normal waking consciousness. However, the less common gamma waves are associated with peak concentration and high-level cognitive tasks. Gamma is also seen in deep meditation, and the zone one enters when engaging in a sophisticated mind-body activity. In 2015, a scientific paper published data indicating that DMT and 5-MeO-DMT reliably increased gamma activity in volunteers. And in 2020, researcher Enzo Tagliazucci published a study also showing that DMT increased gamma activity, and that gamma power increases correlated with subjective reports of mystical type experiences. In our quest to verify whether there could be EEG overlap between exogenous DMT and the Wim Hof method, we decided to do a small test run at an EEG clinic in San Jose, California.
We use the opportunity to do a baseline mapping, which is kind of the ground level, eyes closed, brains at rest, nothing's going on, or it's kind of just in a stable mode.
Body's relaxed?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to record with your eyes closed first. So just, you're going to keep your eyes closed. We're going to record for 5 minutes straight.
Through that, we can see sometimes whether there's symptomology of depression or symptomology of anxiety or other things going on for them. This is eyes closed, so some activity, but it's minimal. It's not really, the brain's not active, it's not really doing a whole lot.
Then you can do your breathing exercise.
Okay.
I'm a big believer on the more natural we can make something, the more it actually is internalized into the person because it's who they are and what they can do, and the stronger the effect.
I absolutely feel euphoric when I'm in there. You caught me, I don't know, a couple of times laughing for no reason. I mean, it's stunning. It's a little bit out of this world.
When Dr. Rick Strassman experimented with administering sub-psychedelic levels of DMT to volunteers, they too reported a sense of euphoria.
So I just did 20 minutes of the Wim Hof method, and I feel amazing. It worked. It works every time. After about 5 minutes, you start to really get in the sensations. In 10 minutes, you start to see wonderful things. 15 minutes, your body starts to vibrate. And at the very end, your nervous system's on fire. I've been wanting to know forever what exactly is going on with the data, with the brainwaves. Something really interesting is happening.
If the Wim Hof method increases gamma wave activity, this may be a telltale sign that the breath technique upregulates endogenous DMT production.
The baseline aspect of what was going on prior to doing the Wim Hof for his eyes closed in the beta range, and you can see that the activity is okay. It's minimal, but it's kind of at rest. The brain's doing what it needs to, all the way into the gamma range, where the brain's just functioning at a lower state. We jump over to what happens after the Wim Hof breathing technique, and you can tell that in the theta range, his front left side of the brain is actually active. Then we also jump over, and you can see that in the gamma range, it's really jumped, where it's quite a bit more active comparative to before. When we compare them side by side, you can see that in the gamma range, this is after the Wim Hof, and this is before the Wim Hof. You can tell that there's quite a bit difference happening in the gamma range.
Gamma waves move back and forth from the brainstem to the prefrontal cortex roughly 40 times a second, allowing for otherwise unconscious processing to be brought to conscious awareness. This may be the reason why psychedelic states, Wim Hof breathing experiences, as well as meditation, all correlate with high-level processing and flow states of consciousness, all of which are accompanied by increased gamma wave activity. As the hunt for a biological counterpart to the altered states brought on by breathwork continues, it must be noted that in near-death circumstances, where respiration stops, psychedelic states are still reported. This leads us to the third and final groundbreaking discovery of John Dean's 2019 publication. In the lab, cardiac arrest was induced on rodent models, and the brain measurement results were astounding. A 600% increase in DMT in the visual cortex was observed. Could this be an explanation for the incredibly visual and psychedelic-like experiences people report after a near-death experience?
I was in a place that was thinking, wow, how did I get in here? Isn't this interesting? And then my very next thought was, oh, I wonder if I can get out. And all of a sudden I was back in my body.
When you're in a coma for 8 to 10 days, you're basically knocking on the door. I was talking to my dad. He had this green thing on. I just remember him saying, I'm not ready for you, son.
DMX told me it was like an out-of-body experience last February when he collapsed without a pulse in a Yonkers hotel parking lot.
You know, unbelievable to some people, but I remember seeing the police officers working on me. That vision is like is burned in my mind. I never envisioned a reason that I would be like hugging a police officer.
What could explain such powerful experiences with such graphic visual representations that carried so much personal meaning?
I think it was a moment that I was somehow being given a choice.
DMT is also neuroprotective, and that's probably the real function of it. When an animal has cardiac arrest, the levels of DMT go up 600%. Not to provide a light show necessarily, it's to protect the neurons from dying from lack of oxygen.
As these experiences often make profound lessons quite simple, understanding the science of endogenous DMT, is anything but.
Something upwards of 20% of people that have cardiac arrest report a near-death experience, an altered state of consciousness. So there has to be a biological correlate of that. There just has to be. Does DMT factor into that? I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's a silver bullet necessarily. The brain is very complicated. The fact that we found it in the visual cortex and it's a highly visual experience, exogenously administered when people take DMT, it would point to maybe that there's some involvement in perception of visual percepts.
I do think it's interesting that it was in the visual cortex, for instance, because there are so many reports of people who undergo near-death experiences who see extreme bright lights, or who even have very visual representations of a life review, for instance. Where is that visual interpretation coming from?
In 2015, Gmo's lab and a few others in the lab did a study inducing cardiac arrest in rats, and they measured the level of various neurochemicals in the brain and measured the level of EEG activity, or measured the brain waves in the animals as they were dying. And what they found was there was not only a massive surge in a number of different neurochemicals just following the onset of cardiac arrest, but there was also this increase in global coherence and brain activity that happened after cardiac arrest had been induced. And that just suggests that the brain is not dead. You know, it's not hypoactive immediately after cardiac arrest, but it's actually hyperactive. There's actually a lot of activity that's happening immediately following cardiac arrest.
The rodents that were studied under cardiac arrest in 2013 showed a spike in gamma wave oscillations that were highly coherent, exceeding levels found even during the conscious waking state.
I've been in contact with pretty much every DMT scientist in the world that's been involved in that space the past, 30 years, maybe even longer. You know, I've even emailed scientists that published stuff in the 60s. And they're like, whoa, I even forgot I published that paper. These guys are like in their 80s, I think.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I've seen a trend where there's a lack of support for that specific field of research. And just like you, I'm interested in what are the implications, right, for mankind, implications for human perception, the human experience, all of that.
John Chavez, the founder of the DMT Quest project, met with John Dean in Michigan and dug deep on how to firmly establish whether or not gamma wave activity and endogenous DMT are in any way correlated.
Multiple studies have demonstrated that psychedelics will increase gamma frequencies in the brain. You can get at that question in roundabout ways. The easiest and most scientific way would be to create an animal, a rat or a rodent, that no longer contains the compound that you're interested in studying. And then you can see how that changes the brainwave profile.
What happens when you do that? If you have these knockout animal models, how does that change their behavior? Does it change their behavior in any obvious way?
A lot of times in biomedical research, you'll use what's called a knockout animal. And a knockout animal is basically a genetic mutant where you've deleted a certain gene of interest, and you can go in and study that animal with a hypothesis that it's lacking that gene, and you can understand the function of that gene. So what we've done is deleted the gene that's necessary for DMT synthesis in a rat strain, and we're using that rat strain to hope to uncover the functions of endogenous DMT.
On the quest to uncover the role of endogenous DMT, an unfinished study out of Louisiana State University may paint a completely different picture on how psychedelic compounds operate in the brain.
Something that Stephen Barker did several years ago. He's a researcher at LSU. He's been a big name in DMT research for the last several decades. They did a sort of a pilot study that never got published, and they showed that the levels of DMT and 5-MeO-DMT were massively increased in animal brains after the administration of LSD.
When we administered LSD to rats, we saw a tenfold increase in the level of endogenous 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine and a 4-fold increase in dimethyltryptamine. This suggests that there is an endogenous hallucinogen neuronal system, and that many hallucinogens may not actually be true hallucinogens, but endogenous hallucinogen neuronal system agonists, that they stimulate the release of these endogenous hallucinogens, which then carry out their function and on perception.
Those results never got published, yet nobody's really funding the work for it. We're basically trying to understand the mechanism of action of how psychedelics can bring about these increases in mental health, these treatments for a variety of different ailments. If we're able to show, for example, that DMT is massively increased, endogenous DMT is massively increased after an administration of LSD or psilocybin, then I think that has massive implications for the future of all psychedelic research moving forward. We're in a really good position in GMO's lab to be able to repeat a study very similar to that.
I was hoping to work on that project full-time for my PhD. Unfortunately, we ran into some funding issues, so I wasn't able to do that. That's sort of the way science works. Hopefully one of my colleagues, Nick Linos in GMO, will have some of those answers soon.
John wasn't able to continue work in GMO's lab because funding wasn't available. And when I came in, I knew that was a risk. When I came to Michigan, I knew that was a risk that I may not be able to join GMO's lab. I may not be able to do this DMT research because funding may not be available. And I consider myself extremely lucky that we found a way to find funding for me to be able to do this work. And we're still pressured with that every day. We're still pressured with trying to apply for additional grants, looking for funding from private sources. Some of the bigger labs in the medical school at Michigan, there's usually a PI, multiple collaborators. There can be a handful of postdocs, maybe 6, 8, 10 postdocs, multiple graduate students, 2 to 3 to 4 graduate students, and then you have research assistants and you have staff people that are working in the lab full time. But with GMO's lab, where I'm working now, there's just 3 of us right now, and I'm the only one who's really focused on the DMT project.
It's important because these are the most important questions in neuroscience, right, with respect to the foundations of consciousness. And it's something that is kind of being overlooked by mainstream neuroscience. So again, it's a question of it will take some funding and some support to do this work, and it's among the most important questions being explored in neuroscience.
A long-term career goal of mine is to be able to develop a way to non-invasively image DMT in the human brain or in the human body. We're a pretty long way off on that, but hopefully within the next decade, it's an achievable goal.
Non-invasive research refers to the ability to measure brain levels of DMT without using needles, probes, or otherwise harming the subject. It might also be able to show us whether or not breathwork, meditation, and even dreaming is involved with endogenous DMT, giving us a much better understanding of the neurochemistry of altered states. As John gears up to leave the University of Michigan, the goals of everyone involved in endogenous DMT research is the same. The field needs more funding if we are to understand why the spirit molecule and the God molecule are floating around naturally inside us all.
Science takes a very long time. You need multiple groups reproducing the same finding over and over, which still needs to happen with endogenous DMT to establish this as actually being something from a hypothesis more into the realm of theory. I think DMT kind of became that band that opens for Led Zeppelin, like in the 60s and 70s.
Big vision for DMT research is to open up the opportunities and get more people involved. I think that's what we really need. I think we've seen with other psychedelic research at Hopkins and at Imperial College London, they've developed these big psychedelic research centers, and it shows they're putting out a lot of research, a lot of studies, and they're extremely successful, and it's really bringing psychedelics back into the mainstream. And DMT, and more specifically endogenous DMT, is still just kind of in the shadows. I think even a small amount of startup funds can really make a big difference.
The importance of funding endogenous DMT studies is that it may provide a basis for all psychedelic research, into which millions of dollars are funneled, but it could also give us a better understanding of what modulates everyday waking reality, of the neurochemistry of altered and mystical states. What if DMT was the missing link between all religions? What if the foundation of all spiritual experiences might have a basis in biology? Could this help bring humanity together? If we could understand just how Wim Hof is capable of achieving the unbelievable, perhaps the protocols of human optimization are just around the corner. What if this really is a simulation, and endogenous DMT was the key? Would the task before us be any different than what the yogis, sages, and mystics called the process of awakening? What if the rapid expansion of the human neocortex had more to do with endogenous DMT than we once believed? What if adaptation of our species to existential and environmental threats wasn't a job for global politics, but an internal responsibility of the collective? What if mental health and the voluntary changing of brain structures was just a few short years of research away? On the quest to scientifically understand being human, we know so little about why the waves collect into atoms and beget molecules and build cells, to become organs that make up the form of a species on the brink of an ocean of questions. The answer to this DMT quest is closer than you think.